In this episode, we talk about the parallels between slow, intentional farming and the way Bitcoin grows, naturally, organically, and free from centralized manipulation. We explore low time preference and how it shows up in raising animals, growing food, and building meaningful community, and how the industrial food system strips away both nutrition and connection. Just like Bitcoin, the power of nature is intangible. It can't be seen or touched, but it's undeniable. It runs on energy, time, and truth. And so does everything we talk about in this conversation. The most important things in life can't always be explained, but that doesn't make them any less real. Welcome back, Freeborn farmer. Thank you for joining me again.
You bet, Stacy. Thanks for having me. I'm just thrilled to be here today.
I'm super excited. We had such a great talk last time, and there was so much more we didn't cover. So there's so many cool things we can talk about today about how you run the farm and what connections you find to Bitcoin. What do you think about doing things sustainably? Like when you think about the meat industry and the way that they grow produce nowadays feels very much like instant gratification. Like, let's grow these crops fast. Let's pump them full of hormones. And do you feel like there's some sort of connection there with how you do things?
Absolutely. Stacy, I think that you cannot rush quality in any way. I think anyone that has a craft or a skill that, they take on, they understand that the amount of time you put into it is fairly directly related to the quality and the self-fulfillment that comes from the end products. The way that we've encouraged our production to be rushed for something that all of us are feeling in our lives. I'm 41 right now, and so from about the time that I really...
We're the same age.
Excellent. The time that I kind of left and went off on my own adventures and things from my upbringing, constant evolution, constant learning. I feel like I've got so many different past lives, but all of them have been kind of revolving around this search for freedom, for quality, and for connections, like really healthy connections in life. And so that low time preference has always been something that I've held very strongly, and I've always tried to be forming really positive and deep connections with nature, which I think is, both terrestrial and kind of metaphysical. And that's really something I've been focused on a lot more, kind of these spiritual connections, where our inspiration comes from. I've started to look at others that way too, and really see a lot more light shining towards me when I see others.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, when you look at nature, you learn so much just from working with it. There's so many lessons that you could learn about life and how nature works and how things are meant to work naturally. When you have too much human control and it's very much inorganic, the quality that's lowered, like you said. But when you learn a lot from nature, just from looking at patterns in nature, the low time preference, waiting for things, being patient for things to grow, to put in that proof of work, like you don't get it unless you work for it, right? So I think so many people were just used to this life where we have that convenience, that modern convenience with fast food. And we don't think about the process it takes to go and pick up that meat from the store. I would love to have more like homegrown organic food. I have a little garden on the side of my house, and I didn't do it last year, I'm not going to lie, because there were so many cicadas and it grossed me out. So I didn't want to, we have a lot of trees by my house. So I was just like, oh my God, they're everywhere. It felt like the apocalypse. But we grow tomatoes and all sorts of different vegetables, but like eating a tomato is a completely different taste.
This speed of development and production that we see in every aspect of our life, what it does is it supports the superficial. And so just like anything you do, if you rush through it, it is not going to have the same depth and quality as if you take your time and allow it to progress naturally. And then it's specifically designed that way because we need to put these things onto trucks and drive them 2,000 miles across the country to grocery stores in all these major cities.
My grandma, I think, used to grow those. Are the really big ones?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's all different varieties of heirlooms. And, people put a lot of time into developing these and creating these new varieties with particular looks or tastes or qualities. Me, I'm like, that does not seem right.
I think it's good for the corporation that wants to extend shelf life so that they don't have to have wasted product. They're like, oh, what chemicals can we put to preserve this longer, regardless of the health risks it causes people? So I think people know that that's an issue, but it does last a good amount of time, but they do mold, but it just would last way longer than you would have regular bread. I really remember, like, during COVID, I was baking a lot more because I had my grandmother's bread recipe and she used to always make it for my kids. And then I was just like, we're like, well, we have all this free time. We better start making more things ourselves and stuff. So I started making bread more often, and we would put them in these loaf pans, and I would like cut it up and freeze it for the kids. So we'd always have it. So that's something that it's nice for people to learn to do, because you're eating it full of so many fake ingredients. And that's why, the connections that we make when we look at nature and we look at how things are produced, and we see even in Bitcoin, the way that Bitcoin grew like the way that grassroots movements do, the way that nature does, the way that it didn't rush, it didn't have corporations behind it. It just grew because it did naturally over time, because it doesn't have some corporation trying to change it or alter it.
It's never been more true that you are what you eat. And right now, what's available at the store will make you a shallow, superficial, unhealthy person.
Yeah, you take away that power for people to be able to learn to do these things themselves. Now they rely on you. And I think part of the thing about this inflationary fiat system that we live in is just thinking about when you watch even old movies and you see a little town with all the local shops and mom and pop shops, and everyone owns their little business there. And even how it is probably by you living on your farm and having probably a local community where people actually own their stores. But, as time goes by in real life where I live, there's really not too many family owned, everything is corporate, everything is, and that's what inflation does, because the people with the most money benefit from inflation. And the people that have these mom and pop shops and small businesses, there's less and less of those. And you struggle more and more as time goes by through inflation. So it's almost like this fiat system is suffocating the community. It suffocates the smaller, keeping things local and keeping groceries coming from the community and people growing it. It almost starves them of the ability to continue this way of life. So the corporation has to step in and show you, here, look, we're here to help. We put in a big grocery store. Don't worry about that farmer anymore. Don't worry about growing things yourself. We'll take care of you. And it's like kind of like this false sense of security that you'll be taken care of, when really you're just given food that makes you sick. And there's this grocery store that is actually, it's interesting. There's this grocery store near my salon that is, it's a European, like they import a lot of European foods. And I told one of my clients about it because my kids like Nutella and I try not to buy it for them. But I'm like, you know what? Sometimes I do. They beg for Nutella, but I bought it there, and it comes in a glass jar, and it has only 3 or 4 ingredients in it. And when you buy it from any other grocery store that's not imported, it has like 20 different chemicals in it. And you're wondering, why is it that the one that's imported from outside the US is more real, where you can understand the ingredients? Why is it that the ones here that they sell for everyone else in a plastic jar that has all these different things that you don't understand what they are, why are those even in there? Like an orange soda. Like the Fanta at that store that's imported is a light orange color because it's not pumped full of colors and dyes to make it look bright orange, so it's more appealing to sell to people. So they do it because they're like, oh, it would be more catching to the eye. It would, it would sell better. It's marketing. So you go to a regular store and you get the bright orange Fanta for your kids instead of the light orange one that's, at least it's got sugar, but at least it's real ingredients, and I think other countries preserve that idea more than America does.
It's my belief that we're being used as disposals for industrial waste. That is the only reason I can imagine that these things are in our foods. Crisco, well, so, we raise pigs. I wanted to, in everything I do, I've taken things that I use frequently in my life, anything I use frequently in my life, I try to decide, let me see what it takes to produce this or make this thing. And then I can decide if I want the convenience that this enslavement by the fiat system is offering me. Because I don't always think it's definitely never worth it to just say, yeah, sure, I'll take that convenient thing and just blindly go on with my life. So I've tried to really figure out, like, what can I or can't I do? Turns out you can do everything. And then it becomes, what if it's worth it to me to really spend my time, my limited resources of time to do? So with pigs, my wife is from the South, and so she really likes biscuits and gravy. I also like biscuits and gravy. You need to have sausage for that. And then everyone in the world likes bacon. And so, we decided, well, we need to get pigs then, because we probably can't do without pork products in that way. And we're disgusted by the industrial food system and the way that they treat these animals. So we decided to get into pigs. Most people would probably buy a couple of wieners, which is like a 30-pound pig that's, been weaned from its mom. You buy them and then you feed them for 4 to 6 months, get them up to weight and take them to the butcher. So we ended up finding a couple of sows online and went and bought them.
What are those?
Like a bred female.
Okay.
Like a big full-grown female pig that's been bred. We bought 2 of them. We raised them up. We ended up with probably 20-some pigs. We needed like 1 for ourselves, and then we're like, well, shit, now we have 19 pigs that we need to sell. Turns out pigs are the easiest thing in the world to sell. You can sell them as that wiener age, fats, which is just a little bit bigger than that. You can sell them as butcher hogs. You can sell them as breeding stock. Some of the people that bought pigs from us that first year, they come back every single year now. And so I've been seeing these people for, 5 years. And so it's building community just in that sense. And then you start to get known for raising good pigs. And what we always hear from people are, 1 of 2 things. Either they've never had pork that tasted that good, or they have not had pork that tasted like that since they were a kid in the 50s or 60s. And so that just feels so great, and it becomes that this food you're producing is already producing community around you. And then you end up with a product that you're eating that you know exactly how it lived, what went into it, how it died, and that this is a healthy animal that would live a life free from stress. Any meat that you buy at the store, that animal is going to be subjected to stress. It's going to have had cortisol coursing through its body and muscle. That's not good for you to eat. No. It stays in their genetic code, and you're ingesting that. So again, you are what you eat. Do you want to be a stressed out, anxious, unhealthy animal? It's not a good way to go. One of my favorite books with pigs, it's called Happy Pigs Taste Better. That's like what we try to do with all of our animals. It's like they all get to live the greatest possible life until that, it's the planned, inevitable time when they're going to become food for my family and other families around as well.
I love that you did this, and other people get to they all come back for a pig for their family, then have that, freeze it, keep it for the rest of the year. I don't know how long it lasts, a family, but I can't even kind of imagine how long a pig goes, whole pig. But it's just crazy to think that some people might find that hard to do, which it is. I'm sure it is. You raise them up and you think it's so hard. But when you go and buy meat at the grocery store, you're not thinking about that ever. You don't think about what went into that animal and how stressed they were and what kind of effect that has on your body. It's nice to see that you're doing this, but you're also sharing that with the rest of the community, and you're able to sell them to help your family and help your farm. At least this animal had a happy life until that day came. And you're actually eating food that's nutritious for you and it's not harming you.
I just think it's fantastic that people can come to, say, buy some milk or, buy some pork chops, and it ends up being a half day outing for the family, like as if they went to a park or something. They get outside, they get to see these animals and engage with them. I am just so unwilling in my life to allow hard parts of things to just be done by someone else so I don't have to deal with the reality of that. I believe that freedom and self-sovereignty, it's not having responsibility removed from you, it's being fully responsible for your life, for the things that you require or desire for survival.
Real quick, I want to tell you about Satosh Shoes. Wearing your statement represents sound money to the world. If you talk the talk, you gotta walk the walk. So many styles to choose from, including the white paper. Use my code to get 10% off your order, and for every order you place using that code, you also help support my channel through the Bitcoin Lightning Network. You're providing value for your community. It's just such a good feeling. The entire system is so backwards, and it's so filled with the wrong incentives and people being afraid of that hard work. I love that you said that, because it is something that you have to face, and it's reality. And
with that too, I had a post on X this morning in regards to that Satoshi's group and just the importance of this kind of feminine energy to guide the entire world through this much needed transition that we're in right now. It's just like we need to have a softer outlook. We need to have a slower outlook, a nurturing one. I believe, among many other things, that comes from a feminine energy. On the farm here, mothering skills is the greatest resource that we have. And this comes from what we raise heritage breeds. So it's kind of like those heirloom tomatoes. The breeds of pigs, cows, sheep, goats are a little harder, but they're almost heritage breeds just in general. They haven't had a lot of modification. But these heritage breeds, which are old, unimproved is what they would call, like an Angus cattle is an improved breed. It means that it's come up in our high-tech, high-production system. We don't get those. And those animals oftentimes, mothering ability does not result in greater outputs of meat. You don't need that if you're in an industrial agricultural system. You don't need an animal to be good at mothering. What they do to pigs, they get these pink hairless pigs. Those pigs can't be outside. They will get so horribly sunburned. It gets fed a very specific mix of vitamins and nutrients, and when they have their young, they have such little instinct to care for them that they're kept in what's called a farrowing crate, which allows them to basically lay there or stand up, and you can't turn around. You could lay facing either direction, and your teats are just exposed so that your litter of piglets who cannot get near you can just nurse. And as soon as they're big enough, they just get, weaned off and moved into a growing pen where they will then get fed that same highly efficient nutrition. It's that superficial shallowness. This is barely an animal anymore. We see this in sci-fi movies with humans, or like in the Matrix, we're just all in these little pods, fueling the energy needs of a system.
yeah,
That's what we're doing with animals. It's terribly sad. And it's the same with chickens, in their tiny cages. This, and I'm just gonna probably swear on occasion during this, but this fucking bird flu that they tried to invent over the past years, I saw them trying to build this thing up, and I know people have issue. They're like, it's real, and it is. But the media, they tried to boost this up to be a COVID type thing for like 3 years. As someone who has chickens, I'm watching like the news come out, and they're trying to build this up, and it's just no one's biting on it. And then they try a different angle, and no one's biting on it. And now it's just gone. Isn't that great?
I wonder about that bird flu thing when they were talking, I think recently, about when they were like, oh, the egg prices are so high because of the bird flu, and so many like either chickens had to be killed because of the bird flu. So that's why the eggs were so expensive. I don't know. But I'm like, so why is chicken not costing much more? Why is it just the eggs?
I would just encourage, if you would just want to get really pissed off, do a Google search to see what they did to kill these birds. I mean, these birds are in indoor, industrial centers, millions of them, thousands in each of these establishments, and you can watch these videos. They just pump in this poisonous foam and you'll just, tens of thousands of birds, and they just pump this poisonous foam over all of them and just do a mass murder of all of these animals. And the thing is, the government pays those producers for those losses. Because, it's like a Tyson chicken or whoever it is doing that. They're contributing to the solution to the bird flu. And so they're getting paid for those birds. The corporations are making their money. They're selling. These birds are just being killed and they're getting paid for each one of them. So
What about,
that's another example of us. Just again, it's just like an inflationary kind of debasement of our money. It's the same thing. They're charging you more for those eggs. They already got paid for the chickens that they killed. They don't give a shit. And now they're getting paid twice as much for these eggs that, the prices are jacked up on. And like we said before, those are barely even eggs. They don't look anything like a free range or a homegrown chicken egg. The yolk is pale, and that's because it has so little nutrient value in it, versus like one you get from a farm that's like a deep dark orange, and it tastes like something, and they're firm, it stands up like that off the pan when you're cooking it instead of like just flattening out. And it's just like you said, if you keep us in fear and feeling like we don't have the ability to take care of ourselves, then we won't try to take care of ourselves. And we won't try to live fearlessly.
nobody wants to deal with that, so let's remove you from the situation. But it's not like you're physically becoming the butcher. You're not doing it yourself. You're taking it somewhere to be processed. But it makes you feel like, well, you wouldn't want to have to do that, would you? So let us take care of it.
To me, in my endeavors to be kind of self-sovereign, self-sustainable, I do not like being lied to. It really upsets me. It's pretty easy to get lied to once. I think anyone wants to put their faith in people or entities. So you can always be let down once very easily. It's when it keeps happening and it's just time and time again, and then you start to understand certain things or learn more about them, and you wonder why the media doesn't tell that story. You wonder why, people of different political views have different, very basic understandings just of science or, whatever. My studies a lot of times are based around water. I just have a deep connection with water. Always have. Water is fascinating because if you attempt to force water into stability, it will design its own chaos inside of it. It'll cavitate if you put enough water through a structure, like say a hose, and try to get that to act uniformly for all eternity. It will go against its own predictable nature and create chaos just to blow out a pipe or something like that. And so the universe demands chaos. Nature demands chaos. Nature will not allow stasis. It's why it's so essential that the world has, earthquakes and these things. If it weren't for constant change, we would just still be like a ball of electrically charged goo. There'd be no evolution. It takes millions of accidents, of which one or two gains traction, that we develop and grow. So this idea that modern society, of this superficial, shallow existence, the idea that if we just sterilize everything, make there be no potential downfalls, but also no potential enormous benefits, we can just sterilize everything and just give you that bare minimum efficient feed or whatever, and we'll have this great life. It's like, no, we're not petri dishes. We have relations to everything around us. You and I, we've kind of built a friendship after just talking to each other. That doesn't happen with just everyone, and so what is it? What possible connection do you and I have where there's no reason that I wouldn't have that same connection with someone else, but I don't have that with everyone? And so there's, it's the space between things that all the magic is happening. But modern scientism does not look at that. We look at the entities. We have this very narrow, materialistic view of things, and we're going to study what this thing does, and this is how science sets it up. Let's remove all the variables and see how this thing acts all by itself in a controlled environment. But that's not real. That's not real life. So we can't actually learn much of anything other than what that exact thing does if it's by itself. If you
That's
leave me
amazing.
alone to just do nothing in a room with one book, I'll probably read that book. That doesn't mean that if I'm in a baseball stadium watching, the game go on, that I'm just going to sit there and read a book. It's like, that's not me. That's just what I did in that one particular instance.
Yeah.
So it takes away the entire complexity of the world. And they actually try to negate the complexity of the world and say everything can be boiled down into essential behaviors.
That's why it's so interesting that you said about the water and how, nature needs chaos and how there's so many things happening that we don't really understand. Data and science alone can't see the interaction energetically that things have in the world, how the universe works in that way that's so interconnected. So you're trying to control nature, and it's against nature to want to be controlled. These things cause change for a reason. Like, change is necessary because just like how you think about our bodies and muscles, and as you age, if you stop exercising those muscles and tearing the muscle and growing it, you start to deteriorate. Like the muscle starts to atrophy. So either you're growing by ripping something apart, changing it, adding to it, building it, or you're not doing anything and it dies slowly. That's why you're interested in all that quantum physics, Bitcoin talk and everything too, because you have such a background in studies and science.
Yeah, I think I probably between too much drug use and influential books at a young age, like in high school, I probably had too many hallucinogens and also read too much Carlos Castaneda, which then made me want to read Schrodinger's cat and all these different things. So at a young age, I really started to mess with my mind and got involved in things that really just questioned the physical materialism of our world. And the realisticness, both, and that's what's interesting. You read a quantum physics book, and then are you familiar with Carlos Castaneda? He was
I'm
an
familiar with
anthropologist.
Schrodinger's.
Castaneda was an anthropologist who went to study shamanism in the Yaqui Indian tribes, and then he's kind of it's the classic of example of oh, he went native, and lost his scientific perspective because he started engaging too much with the subject, which is against the scientific method. You're supposed to be removed, but he started engaging in these being guided into these spirit worlds that science would completely disavow any reality to, but it's just it's real, it's happening, and he's documenting this stuff. And then you've got quantum physics, which is the exact same kind of stuff, just on a little bit of a different level. But it's saying we cannot trust the physical makeup of our universe, or then you read things that there's no difference in the electron makeup of water and solids. And so why can't I dip down into this floor or walk across this water over here? And without getting too wacky about that, it just all ties into what limitations are my mind placing on my existence that's interfering with my full accomplishment in life.
That's why, because you were so open-minded and trying to think outside the box and look at things from a different standpoint, is probably part of why you are so free thinking and doing what you're doing and not following the rules, and being a rebel in that way by growing your own food. And
in my mind, and I feel so fortunate because I'm I'm physically capable. I've got a good mind, and I try not to let myself be indoctrinated by things. But it's my belief that if something can be done, anyone can do it. And it's just that kind of thing. It's like a proof of work. It's just well, it's done, and therefore it's doable. And then if you expand that, it becomes that the only things that aren't doable are those things that haven't yet been done. And so it's just we're just so limited in our own constructions of the universe. And that's just like another one of those lies that I just more and more am just becoming unwilling to accept. And I've, in listening to your podcast and a couple others, I just keep hearing discussions of, fourth turnings, celestial awakenings, spiritual rebirth. And I also see these ideas being mirrored in more mainstream ways of understanding, like in human geography, just the way that societies develop and like the way that technologies like guide societies into new directions and things like that. Or like connections to largely insects that exist within these superorganism statuses, where each individual ant or bee is an individual creature, but you can also biologically see the colony as an individual entity. And those individual members of it are just like extensions of the larger self. And in some ways, I wonder, it's like, as humans, have we limited ourselves so heavily through the Industrial Revolution period where we've clogged our airwaves with signals and radio waves? I mean, there's so much congestion out there that, like you and I were talking, like the connection that, we may feel emotionally, or I guess it'd be emotionally, like to each other as friends. How is that connection so readily available where it's not with others? I also, after listening to your discussion with Holly Berkeley, like started listening to those telepathy tapes, which seems to very, very much identify and prove the existence of other worldly forms of communication, that not
I
only
want to hear
exist
those.
between terrestrial, but with celestial beings as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to hear those too. I don't know which ones were those her tapes.
No, this was I believe the lady's name is Kai Dickinson, I think. And I'd first heard about it because she was on Joe Rogan talking with him about just kind of the development of this idea. But she did this whole series, and it's focused on nonverbal, largely folks on the autism spectrum, who forever science and like these established entities have claimed that they're just empty. That's just parents. You're just going to have to deal with that. Your child doesn't really exist. It's just a shell of a human, just this hugely derogatory, diminishing mentality. Turns out that fairly frequently there's examples of parents or teachers, people who spend time with around and with these people, started noticing like very strange kind of telepathic instances. And then something like particular would happen where it's just like, did you just read my mind? And it's like, sure as shit, they did. And this lady, Kai, she started doing kind of setting up her own scientific examples and experiments to kind of show that, like, no, we're not manipulating this. Like, mom is in another room with a deck of cards. And they even tried it. It wasn't even like as simple as a deck of cards. You've got a 1 in 52 chance of guessing. That's too easy for science to actually agree. And like, this one kid, before you understand like what they're doing, he would go in his room and pile pillows all over his head and lay on his bed. And it's because he's trying to isolate all outside noise and distractions. So, from a modern medical perspective, they'd be like, oh, he's just acting out. That's just like, it's just kind of, automated behavior because he's overwhelmed. And it's like, no, this kid is isolating out distraction, and he's communicating with thousands of other telepathic individuals, just through telepathy.
It's almost like, is that evolution that you're seeing? Is that like, instead of needing a neural link implanted in your brain, is that just how humans will evolve over time, where they'll just be more connected and meet on the hill instead of having to have some implant? Is that really some early form of evolution that you're seeing? That's just super fascinating. And that's why the more you find out about science, the more questions you always have.
And it happens at all scales. In a forest setting, different trees within a single species can transmit messaging through mycelium to others of that same species to, like, for example, say there's like a beetle outbreak that's coming. They have studies that show that, like, this tree that, say, is, you know, one of the first to be attacked by beetles, and so it has its own kind of physical response to it. That physical response will be picked up by those fungal connections through the mycelium, transmitted throughout the forest to these other trees, and they will begin to put up defense mechanisms for something that has not physically affected them yet. And so there's communication through ecosystem, through any system. And that's the thing. If we just look at trees and mushrooms, you are going to miss out the in between. And that's where everything happens, is in between the points of observation. And so we limit our own understanding by only looking at those easily observable things. But the transmission between the two, it's both ephemeral, and that's kind of that quantum aspect. It's like we're trying to figure out what happens, like, in between these circumstances, you know, or simultaneous to these circumstances.
It's fascinating to me that because humans are closer to mushrooms than mushrooms are to the plant world in genetics, that it's funny that mycelium talks to forests and changes its environment based on what's happening around it. But then it's fascinating that it's a network, just like our neural connections are a network. And why does mycelium have an effect on human neural networks? Like, why, you know what I mean? It's just, how does nature connect with humans, and how does the root system of that look so much like connector, you know, like the brain connection? And are we closer genetically than we think? And do we speak to each other, plants and nature? And, like, you know, it's just like how things work is so beyond what we really truly understand. You know, it's like there has to be, it's like almost like obvious that there's a connection there, but it's like you don't know how. You know, it's just so mind blowing.
Well, and there's, you know, there's studies too, and these are all always refuted by science because they weren't expensive enough or sterile enough, you know. But and that's in that telepathy tapes, you really see how the established scientism and materialism worldview just continues to deny these things, and they'll try to find any justification why it's not, you know, it wasn't done properly, blah blah blah. But there's similar types of studies that show when you subject water molecules to hatred or love, they will organize themselves differently. They will look ugly if you submit it to hatred. They will look beautiful if you submit it to love. Same with plants. You know, it's like we all have heard, you know, you play music and, like, plants will respond well. But same thing, if you have two tomato plants sitting there and one you not even, like, tend to, but just emotionally connect with in a positive way, versus this one, you say, you fucking ugly plant, you're never going to grow a tomato, I don't even know why you're here, I'm going to let you die. You know, it's like it fails to thrive. And why? You know, it
That's so
happens.
crazy. Yeah. Because it's true. If the water, I mean, that thing is a living thing that absorbs sunlight, and sunlight being energy, but it also drinks water, and water can be affected by how we think, you know, and how the vibe, you know, the energy that's around it. So if you're feeding that plant self-hate, you know, and like whatever, it's not going to do well. And just reminds you of snowflakes. Like, snowflakes are all uniquely different. Is that the structure that changes when you look at water?
And this really ties into, you know, again, I recently listened to that telepathy tape, so those ideas are fresh in my mind. But, you know, when a lot of these kids, and, you know, a lot of them, they revisit with them as young adults and things, so it's not just kids. But, you know, when they talk about, like, what's the extent of this ability, you know, like, clearly you're able to, like, do this with your mom, or, like, you know, others who have similar, you know, situation as you. But it turns out that, you know, many of them believe that, you know, they speak to God. And what is that? And it seems that it's just a frequency of love is what is
That's what I think.
commonly understood. And so, and I think, like, you know, motivational speakers will tell you these things, like, you know, envision success, you know, do your daily, like, what do you call it, like your confirmation or affirmations, you know. It's like, you know, be the change you want to see in the world. Like, every religion talks about these ideas of, like, you know, that, like, You got to project like your success. You got to see it before it happens, kind of thing. It's like a golfer would tell you that. It's like, see it going in the hole. Don't wait till after you already hit it. But it's the same thing that these kids are saying, that it's a frequency. It's a frequency of love that connects all things. And I just think that's such an empowering way of viewing the world, and to understand that, like, if we can align our frequencies properly with this greater frequency of the universe, you will gain the strength of the entire universe for your endeavor.
I believe that. I like to connect nature with science, with religion. If the frequency is love and you're saying, I don't have to do this alone, I can do this with the help of this loving universe and being that's all around me. And when you say that, you unburden yourself, because the weight of the universe can carry all of this. Like, we're just human, so to carry this burden on our own is a lot of pressure and weight. You do get this strength from somewhere. You get this because you're open to it. If that's the frequency these kids feel, that's truth. It's like, love is truth.
Mm-hmm.
That's God then. God is truth, and God is also math. Again, tying back to like what you see in the farming too, like all these patterns in nature, the way flowers grow, their patterns, they're the way seeds grow and kind of multiply. It's almost like that same pattern of growth that is everywhere around us. And it's kind of telling you that it's there, like a little message.
And that's, I think it was, again, Holly Berkeley mentioned in your discussion with her, it's that like red carpet that gets rolled out, and when you've aligned things and really like gone into it with the proper, respect and lack of ego, it's just the path gets cleared for you and things happen. And, this is kind of where I'm at right now. And I feel like I'm like searching for guidance and help along the way. But there's just all of these like intuitions coming to me recently, and a lot of them are, things I'll hear on your podcast, as you're just talking to people, like kind of off the cuff, off a script about just, what's going on and like, how are you seeing the world? And I just keep finding more and more people who are tuned in to these very similar projections and like directions in their lives. And it's the kind of thing where I don't need to understand it how they do it, because they already understand that. I just need to connect with those people, and then we'll create a network. And just like that mycelium, it's just like, I'm going to just kind of absorb like these universal connections are going to transfer from you to me, the things that are going to be a benefit to me. And then what leaves me, as someone that's just trying to learn, I'm just like, God, I hope that I'm providing something in return.
I say this, I feel like people are going to get so tired of me saying I have goosebumps, when I talk, but like, I feel like it happens to me every time, and I'm like, there she goes again saying it, but it's like, whatever, that's what happens. But it just takes me away today thinking, even though we talked about all these amazing things, I feel like that is definitely going to stick with me. There's so many things that will stick with me from this conversation, and I love that you want to connect with other people because of it. And that's why we have this strength as a community, as Bitcoiners who all find out that we all value truth and we value people that care and are genuine and all this stuff. What you bring is so valuable. The proof of work, cultivating your land, growing your animals, that is like literally how humans are supposed to live. And you could find so much truth in that. So thank you so much for being impactful. You are just refreshing and you have so much insight. I'm happy to have you back even another time. You'll be my first third timer. You'll be like the people on SNL that are like 5-timers club.
Do I
You'll
get
be
a
like the
jacket
person
or
that
a
gets
hat
the
or something?
jacket. I love talking to you, and thank you again for talking to me today.
Thank you, Stacy. It's just a pleasure. We covered so much ground, but it was a heck of a good conversation. Just really enjoyable.
Thank you. I'll see you on X, and I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good.
Bye.